I went to university in a suburban area, so in order to get anywhere off campus, I would have to drive. The problem was, I hated driving. Ever since I first drove, I've always hated driving. Unfortunately, driving is almost a requirement to get around in the suburbs, and so I drove. I hated the other drivers. I hated how they would drive barely the speed limit in passing lanes. I hated how they would drive under the speed limit in the other lanes. And the bicycles, I hated how they would refuse to obey traffic laws half the time, and how the pedestrians would stare at their phones, not paying attention to where they were walking. And how when people were commuting to and from work and school, traffic would be at a near standstill, making it impossible to get anywhere in a reasonable time. Even going somewhere a few miles away would take seemingly forever during this rush hour traffic. And my least favorite part of driving was finding parking. When going out to eat, finding parking in those overcrowded, small, busy parking lots was always a nightmare. Parking lots are also where tens of thousands of car accidents happen per year, and so it's always stressful to me to drive there when they are incredibly crowded. Even now, several years after obtaining my driver's license, I always dread those small and crowded parking lots. During one summer, I decided to take a couple summer courses to get some degree requirements out of the way. One of the courses was twice a week during the afternoon, and the other was online at my own pace, so I didn't really have to maintain a proper sleep schedule. It eventually got to the point where instead of waking up in the morning and going to sleep at night like I'd been doing for the past several months, I would wake up early at night and go to sleep in the morning. I didn't intentionally do this, but my class schedule combined with the closest grocery store not closing until midnight, combined with a few dining options being open until incredibly late, enabled the degradation of my sleep schedule. Waking up so late, doing things in the middle of the night after everyone had gone home, was peaceful. Traffic was non-existent. I didn't have to worry about other drivers because there were almost none. I didn't have to worry about crowded parking lots because there were none that late at night. The normally crowded grocery store parking lot would have barely anyone there. I would sometimes eat my dinner at 3 a.m. I usually wouldn't go out at that time to sit down at a restaurant and eat, but would instead eat something at my apartment. But when I did go out to eat, there were surprisingly a number of places open. One of those places was a Korean restaurant that at the time was open for 24 hours a day. Normally the parking lot for that restaurant was packed. If I went there during normal eating hours, it would be nearly impossible to find a parking spot. But when I would go there at 3 at night, the only people there would be the employees and myself. I'd be the only person eating at that huge restaurant. Normally, it didn't seem like a large restaurant with all the people inside. But with just me eating alone there, it was as if the restaurant's interior became bigger. It was so peaceful. Normally, it was hard to hear myself talk at that place when it was crowded. But as the only customer, I could even hear myself think. And when I finished my meal and walked out into the nearly empty parking lot, it was so calm. Being the only person there in the middle of the night was such a soothing experience. And since it was the middle of summer, it was nice to be able to avoid the daytime summer heat and experience the much cooler summer nights. No traffic, no people, and cool weather. It was almost like being in some kind of single-player video game, like the kinds where there are very few NPCs, where it's easy to explore places, where there are a few buildings you can enter, while the rest of them are just there for decoration, where all of the traffic lights are green. I didn't have to really worry about other people since there were so few of them. It was such a relaxing time, and even though I still had class a couple times a week, I could take my online course at my own pace at whatever times I wanted, with the exception of the exams, of course. I suppose part of what contributed to the peaceful nights was the fact that several students went back to their hometowns for the summer or got internships in other cities rather than staying to take summer classes. I would stay up late during the normal school year sometimes, and at night there would still be people around, although in smaller numbers. But during the summer nights, it was almost like a ghost town. Eventually, the summer came to an end, and my schedule had to revert back to normal. I once again was thrust into a daytime schedule and was forced to once again experience the terrible traffic and the crowded parking lots. The nights were once again slightly more populated as students came back to the nearby apartments and dormitories. I suppose it is better that way, with all the people there, since without people, the local businesses would probably not do as well financially. A few times during the normal school year, I would end up with a terrible sleep schedule and get to the point where I would be going to some fast food restaurant at 6 in the morning for dinner. This didn't happen often though, and my sleep schedule would revert back to normal very quickly since my classes were more numerous and during daylight hours, unlike during the summer where my time as a night owl lasted for quite a while. Would I do something like this again? Change my sleep schedule so that I'm awake when it's dark and asleep during the day? No, I wouldn't. If I was forced to take a job that required me to work during the night, then I would have no choice but to do so. But given the choice, I wouldn't do this again, not for an extended period of time. The night can be relaxing, calm, and peaceful. Less traffic, fewer people, and reduced noise levels. But it's also lonely. Being one of the few people around doing things is lonely. Everyone else would be in bed sleeping, and I would be awake, doing things and going places. Sure, it was nice to be the only person at a restaurant or store, but there were fewer stores open at night, so my dining and shopping options were much more limited. Friends wouldn't usually be awake at the same time as me, so I would be alone most of the time or be forced to change my schedule for a bit when we would spend time together. I wouldn't mind being a night owl like this every once in a while, maybe for a few days. But becoming a night owl for several weeks, while calming and relaxing with far fewer nuisances, makes the world seem much more empty and made me feel more lonely and isolated.